is a front-page story in New York as the presses roll once more after a 114-day blackout of the city's major newspapers. Once more the city rooms hum, once more the tickers click, the linotypes clank, and the smell of printer's ink is in the air. The shutdown began when the printers struck last December. They were joined by other craft unions, and it wasn't until the photo engravers voted to return to work that New Yorkers had newspapers to read once more. It was the costliest strike of its kind in history. Estimates run as high as $450 million. There was no real winner in the strike, but everyone is happy it's over. The unions gained about $12.50 a week for their members during the 2-year contract, which will now expire in April instead of the Christmas buying season. A lot of housewives are happy too. Did you ever try to line a bureau drawer with a radio? Once more, New Yorkers can read all about it.
Journalism has many different aspects, and there are a lot of ways to think about this. One way to think about the different aspects of journalism is to think about the different media that are involved in journalism. Print, for example, newspapers and magazines, that's one aspect of journalism. Broadcast media, specifically radio and television, those are other aspects of journalism. And of course online journalism. That in many ways brings in elements of print as well as broadcast journalism. Now these different aspects of journalism do require different skill sets. Your typical print journalist, for example, does not know how to run a camera. And your typical television journalist doesn't necessarily know how to write a 12 column inch story for a newspaper. At least that's the case right now. Increasingly, these skills are converging. So in order to be a print journalist, you might still primarily need that print journalism skill set, but you're also going to have to know how to run a camera and also have to know how to run a recorder to record audio, and maybe even a still camera to take your own still pictures, because increasingly media outlets are requiring all of these skills. So that actually points to another aspect of journalism, which is convergence, this idea that, that there are many ways to present information. Increasingly, a single media organization is presenting information on the web, through television, through radio, and through print. So obviously if you're a journalist working for that organization, you're going to have to know at least something about all those different media. Now another aspect of journalism, in fact an increasingly salient aspect of journalism, is those that pertain to the World Wide Web. Generally, journalism is moving away from print and toward the web, maybe even moving away from television and radio per se and toward the web. And in that sense, you're going to need to be familiar with that environment. Because the web production is cheap, hosting is cheap, information lives forever on the web or can in an archive. So this is an increasingly attractive medium both for audiences and for media. Currently the industry is kind of trying to figure out how to capture revenue from content that's on the web. But so those are some aspects of journalism. There are many more aspects, probably too many to go into. It's a very broad field.
Now, Greg, you had a very illustrious, amazing career. You uncovered a lot of stories, and I was wondering, throughout your career, what is one story that sticks out to you that you're most proudest of breaking?
Wow. I would say that the story that was the most difficult and the most heartbreaking is I uncovered that George Bush was involved in a gold mining company, Barrick Gold. And that gold mining company, to seize control of a gold mine in Africa, rolled bulldozers over the property to get rid of the small-scale miners that were there. But those miners were still in their mines. George Bush's company and Barrick Gold Mining buried alive 50 people. Wow. I covered that story, and that was tremendously dangerous, but mainly for my sources. One was charged with sedition, others were beat up, others have disappeared. It has been totally crushed in the United States and in Europe. This is the most harrowing story that I've uncovered. I've uncovered a lot of, important stuff. I don't want to dismiss things, like I found the inside documents for the plans for the oil fields of Iraq before the invasion by George Bush. I uncovered how Catherine Harris stole the election by wiping out black people off the voter rolls. You know, I uncovered how BP had a blowout, and that was another story I'm very proud of that got really no coverage, got crushed in the United States. I put it on top of the BBC News, which is that 17 months before the Deepwater Horizon blowout, BP had a similar blowout for the same reason on another offshore rig in the Central Asian Republic of Azerbaijan. But they were able to cover it up through bribery and threats and everything else, and the U.S. media would not touch that story. BP knew that. They said they were shocked when their cement failed and the rig blew up and 11 people died and the Gulf Coast was destroyed. They said they were shocked. This had never happened. That's a complete, absolute lie. And I got arrested in Azerbaijan trying to cover that story. So, I mean, I've had a lot of very important stories. I would say that the burying those miners alive with George Bush's gold mining company, that was the most harrowing story. And I was threatened, my guardian was sued, I was threatened with lawsuits and ruin, and of course my sources were charged with crimes. They could have been hung. It was really grim.
Yeah. I think what you're doing is extremely important because you're covering news that the mainstream media won't touch or doesn't even have access to or even want to get near. And I was always wondering, from just watching it and observing it, how is it possible to find all these stories that nobody else is talking about? Do you have any tips and recommendations for the citizen journalists out there?
Yeah. Well, the great journalist, Yogi Berra, said, "It's amazing what you can see when you're looking." And that's the trick. You have to open your goddamn eyes. And you have to stop going to those fucking press conferences and rewriting press releases. We don't have reporters in America. We have repeaters. They go to those presidential press conferences, Obama said today, and, you know, like, who cares? Who cares? They get the official news, the talking points. It makes me puke. It's the, you know, the horse race. Oh, Hillary Clinton has a new pantsuit and a new hairstyle. You know what? I don't give a fuck about Hillary's hairstyle, okay? That's how it is. I don't care. I don't want to know, all right? What I do want to know is you know, was there another blowout of an offshore oil rig before BP's Deepwater Horizon blowout? And there was. That's the stuff I'm going after. And you know what? They don't want to do that because they don't want to spend the money. They don't want to take the time. It's risky. You get sued. You get threatened by suits. I mean, you know, the New York Times would not touch the Barrick Gold story because they said, we'll get sued, but they have the same lawyer I did, Floyd Abrams. And he said, Times won't touch it because you got sued. They'll get sued. They'll spend $500,000 winning the suit, but, you know, they'll get scared off by it. So corporations are allowed to censor this crap, you know. So that would be, you know, you got to stop repeating. And so therefore, when you talk about citizen journalists, that's the only journalists. There are citizen journalists, and then there are corporate journalists. And I don't know of any corporate journalist which is producing anything. You know, Cy Hirsch, who uncovered the My Lai massacre with my friend Ron Ridenour. He was fired by the New York Times. You know, the great journalists do not survive in U.S. news. So one of my first recommendations is, you want to be a journalist? Don't go to fucking journalism school, okay, where they pull your brains out, where they hypnotize you and tell you to bleach your teeth and write in a reverse pyramid style. Okay, so screw that. Second, avoid taking jobs from these motherfuckers. Stay off their fucking payrolls. In other words, if you're going to work for the Times, you got to toe the line. If Seymour Hersh got fired, you'd get fired too. Dan Rather finally, for 1 minute in his life, repeated one of my stories that George Bush weaseled out of the war in Vietnam because his daddy got him into the Texas Air Guard. The one real story that Dan Rather did in his entire career, and he gets fired. Now he's worth $250 million to CBS. So you're never going to be able to do real stories if you work for these crap holes. I mean, if you're going to work for Izvestia and Pravda, you're never going to do any real journalism. It does not exist. I haven't seen it. There are good journalists in these places, but they are never assigned to do any real stories, and because it also costs too much. All the journalism there is citizen journalism. There is nothing else. And I got to tell you, I did not start out as a journalist. I certainly didn't go to goddamn journalism school. I was an investigator, and then I moved to investigative reporting when I found out that the American news media would not cover the real news. And then if I wanted to work, I had to uncover real news. I had to go to England, where I immediately got work as an investigative reporter with The Guardian and with BBC Television and Channel 4 and other British outlets. And here I am. I work. You'll see me on RT. You'll see me on Al Jazeera. You'll see me on BBC Television and ITV and Canadian Broadcasting in America. I'm persona non grata.
I totally understand how that feels. I personally went to journalism school for a couple semesters, and then I did what you said and said, fuck it, I'm not doing this shit because it's a waste of my time. And I definitely went independent, and it's a lot freer, and I definitely don't want to work for any other news company. Definitely good tips. Anything else you'd like to say, or any last tips and recommendations for any other journalists out there?
Yeah, well, you're not going to, you want to be a journalist. First of all, you have to see journalism. So go to gregpalast.com and see what it looks like, the real stuff. And also, if you have the guts for it, and if you don't mind too much sex, violence, and senseless drinking, read my book about life as a journalist called Vulture's Picnic. That's my book about being a journalist and what it takes. and not only how, I always have great stories, but how many stories I just blew away because I just screwed them up. And you have to be willing to take that chance.
And learn from your mistakes. Check out gregpalast.com. Greg, thank you so much for all your work. Keep it up. Really appreciate it.
Great stuff.